deliverance of Shadrach, and Benny, the rest of the Israelites in captivity were given freedom to worship God. And in addition to that, they were given a promotion. Now, it's a great story that demonstrates what we're talking about today, which is commitment. So let's define our terms. Commitment is and here's what I'm going to say about commitment. Commitment is the resolve to stay with a decision long after the emotion in which the decision was made is gone. You know, that's the way it is with marriage. Resolve to make up your mind to predetermine this is what I'm going to do no matter what. Now, a lot of times we make decisions and commitments based on emotions. But commitment has to be based on more than just that. Emotions aren't bad. They're part of the equation, but they're not how we acknowledge truth or validate truth. Emotions come and go. Feelings are here one day and gone the next. But commitment says the feelings might be gone, but the commitment is solid. Now, would you agree with me that commitment is a quality that's almost disappeared in our society today? Researcher George Barna recently noted, where we once valued commitment, we now value flexibility. I can't commit because I need to keep my options open. I can't commit because I need to remain flexible. I can't commit because I don't want to be tied down. Well, what happens if you choose to be a person of commitment? Well, here's a couple of things that, Shadrach, and Benny experienced. First of all, you will be noticed. You're going to stand out. Show me a person of commitment, I'll show a person who stands out. Daniel 3, verse 12, but there's some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. So that was the person who was reporting on them to the king. You will be noticed, and maybe not in a good way. Well, secondly, you will be targeted. Daniel 3, verse 13. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. See, people with little or no commitment like to bring others down to their level. And you can become the object of ridicule, sarcasm, and in this case, anger. Well, thirdly, you will be questioned. Daniel 3, verse 14. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? For us, is it true that you're following Jesus now, that you go to church? Who do you think you are? Do you think you're better than we are? You can expect some of those responses. It's not all going to be rainbows and unicorns when you come to the Lord. People aren't going to say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm so glad for you. And then thirdly, you will be tested. Daniel 3, verse 15. If you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Come on, everybody else is doing it. What's the big deal? What difference will it make just one time? And so when any of these four challenges come along, you're going to find yourselves at a crossroads, a decision point. And here's the question you should ask yourself. And the question is this: am I going to compromise or confirm my commitment? Shadrach, and Benny were at a major crossroads in their lives. And you have to wonder and speculate that maybe they had a little bit of doubt about their commitment. I mean, what difference would it have made if we just bowed down this once? Aren't we better off to serve God alive than dead? I would have the capacity to think those kind of things. And so if you're like me, when I come to a crossroads, those are some of the questions I wrestle with. What difference is it going to make? Who really cares? Who am I kidding anyway? I can't help but think if it was me that's about ready to get cast into a fiery furnace, if I don't worship and bow down, I could pretend to slip and fall and bow down that way. Or, I have to lace up my sandals or something. But when it comes to these kind of decision moments or crossroads moments, their commitment is tested and shows itself to be weak or strong, true or false. I don't know about you, but I really respect the commitment that these guys had. Do you wish that you had that kind of resolve? Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were able to hold true to their commitment for a couple of reasons. And the first one is this: they believed that God was able. That's the bottom line. Daniel 3:17. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. See, the God I serve is able to help me in that difficult conversation. The God I serve is able to help me in this financial difficulty. Fill in the blank. Ephesians 3:20 says this, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. God can do far more than we can imagine or think of. Great commitments are not built on what I can do. They're built on what God can do through you. Well, secondly, they were determined to do the right thing regardless of the consequences, and that's commitment. Does God promise to come through in every crisis and rescue us from harm? No, that's not exactly the promise. But Rack, Shack, and Benny were determined to be faithful without any guarantee of deliverance. Verse 18. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. See, their commitment was to God. It wasn't to a specific outcome. If we truly believe God is able regardless of the circumstances, and we resolve to do the right thing regardless of the consequences, we will not waver in our commitment to God. So what about commitment? And what are some of the ingredients to it? Well, first of all, commitment starts with the little things. Commitment in the small things is the foundation to commitment in the greater things. Rack, Shack, and Benny made the commitment not to defile themselves with the king's royal food way before they made this commitment not to bow down to that idol. So they already had a track record of being committed to God and demonstrating that. And see, unless we're able or willing to make commitments in life's little things, we won't be prepared to make bigger, more significant commitments. Along the way, holding true to those smaller commitments, you're building a strong foundation beneath you that gives you strong character and strong commitment. And number two, commitments are made inwardly before they're ever revealed outwardly. In other words, they start in the heart. Daniel 3, verse 16, O king, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Their minds were made up long before they ever stood before the throne of Nebuchadnezzar. Our minds have been made up. The decision has been made. There's no room for discussion, no need for debate. And then thirdly, commitment is lived day by day. Commitment has nothing to do with talent and abilities. It has everything to do with choice. And it's one thing to talk about commitment. It's another thing entirely different to live it out day by day. That's where the rubber meets the road. The only real measure of commitment is action. See, it's easy to say words of commitment, but it's way more difficult, I think, to live it day by day. In other words, commitment is not just a one-time decision. It is a day-by-day, moment-by-moment decision. I heard of a newly elected judge who had won office in a special county election. And this is what he said during his acceptance speech. He said, I wish to thank the 424 people who promised to vote for me. I wish to thank the 316 people who said that they did vote for me. I wish to thank the 47 people who came out last Thursday to vote. And I wish to thank the 26 folks who actually did vote for me. Number got whittled down from 424 to 26. Well, here's the question. How are you doing on your commitments? Well, number 4, commitment opens the door to God's best. Now, how many people miss God's best because they quit too soon, threw in the towel too early, and gave up too easily? Daniel chapter 3, verse 29. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Isn't that awesome? The king was able to see God for who he is because of their commitment and God's deliverance of them. So when it comes to commitment, there are 4 kinds of people. There are the cop-outs. People who have no resolve, no goals, no purpose, and don't commit to anything. Then there are the holdouts. People who don't know if they have what it takes, but they have too many limiting beliefs, so they hold out on making commitments. Then there are the dropouts, people who start toward a goal but quit when the going gets tough. And then there are the all-outs, people who set goals, who commit to them, and are willing to pay the price to reach them. Well then, fifthly, commitment reveals deep trust in God. Because commitment says, God, I'm trusting you in this situation. And this works out in a couple of ways. Commitment is revealed when I'm in a potentially compromising situation. Did Rack, Shack, and Benny really trust God? Absolutely, no question. No one could question their commitment. Daniel 3, verse 28, they trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. And so they were in a potentially compromising situation. And the question I often ask someone who is trying to justify a bad decision to me is, how big is your God? Well, I'm going to get even with that person if it's the last thing on earth I do. Well, how big is your God? Is your God so small that he can't take care of that situation, that he can't right the wrong, that he can't clear your name? Or, I have to be dishonest in my business or I won't make it financially. Well, how big is your God? I have to compromise my values or that person's going to dump me in this relationship. How big is your God? I can't afford to give to God and charitable causes because we're barely making ends meet now. Well, how big is your God? So many of our issues in life come down to, do we trust God or not to take care of us? And then commitment is revealed when I'm in a potentially rewarding opportunity. How many people and how many times have people missed out something because they missed out on something great because they weren't willing to take that step of commitment? They're held back by their past failures or by their fears. They're held back by their own limiting beliefs or their lack of faith in God. And if you want to start being a person of commitment, you have to start trusting God and make commitments that stretch you and cause you to put your faith in someone who is bigger than you are. And that's what I love about God and commitments. When we take a step, just a small step, demonstrating faith, God moves with us. It's not the other way around. So many times we think, well, when God gives me a sign, when he provides the resources, when he makes a way, then I'll take a step of faith. Well, typically that's not how it works. It worked with Gideon, but I would say he's the exception. He's not the rule. When the Israelites were crossing the Jordan River to get to the promised land, they had to put their feet in the water first before the water stopped flowing. And there wasn't any tiptoeing into the water. It was more like a plunge because the river was at flood stage. The river's overflowing its banks. It was deep and rushing. And once you took that step, you were committed. But check this out, Joshua 3:15. As soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap of great distance at a town called Adam. God was working 19 miles upstream, so at the moment the Israelites began to cross over, they crossed on dry ground. He's got it covered. See, commitment is the key. It's what unlocks God's blessing so often. Until I'm committed, there's a hesitancy, a tendency to draw back. But the moment I commit myself, then God moves also, and then that precipitates a whole stream of events. All manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, persons, divine appointments, open doors, material assistance, things I could have never dreamed about come my way and begin to flow toward me the moment I make a commitment. Back in the 4th century, an Asian monk by the name of Telemachus decided to make a pilgrimage to the holy city of Rome. He'd never been there before, but he got there, and as a monk, he was looking for where the Pope was and that sort of thing. But the streets of Rome were filled with people, and they're all going in one direction. So he went with them, and he ended up at the Roman Colosseum. So he went inside. He never heard of such a thing, didn't know what all the fuss was about. And then, so he had a seat, and then he saw 2 gladiators step into the ring, and they gave the customary salute of, "We who are about to die salute you, Caesar." And then he realized what was going on. Here were 2 men that were going to fight to the death for the entertainment of the masses. And he couldn't handle it. He stood up where he was, and he said, "In the name of Christ, stop." Well, nobody heard him. And so he actually went down close to the ring, And he said it again, in the name of Christ, stop. Nobody paid any attention to him, so he literally jumped over the barrier and into the arena. And he got in between the two gladiators. And he said, in the name of Christ, stop. And by this time, people in the crowd were booing because he'd stopped the action. And one of the gladiators took his sword and ran him through with the sword. And he fell to his knees, and his last words were, in the name of Christ, stop. And he died. The Roman Colosseum was silent for a moment, and then it began with one person. One person got up, and they walked out. And another person over here got up and walked out. And this soon small groups of people were leaving. And the entire Roman Colosseum was emptied without anyone saying a word. And history tells us that's the last time men ever fought to the death in the Roman Colosseum. Do not underestimate the commitment of one person to God and what happens when God uses a person like that. Will you join me in prayer? God, I thank you for just this story of commitment from these guys. It's encouraging to our faith. God, we are fallible human beings. We don't do it perfectly, but God, we want to have that kind of commitment to you. So we place our faith, we place our commitment in you and ask that you not only provide deliverance and freedom to people, but I pray that people can see you in us as a result. God, thank you for your grace and for your goodness. We say we want to commit.